We have been tracking Idaho's quest to have public money pay for private schools since day one of this year's legislative session. Actually, a little bit longer, since lawmakers have been trying to crack this nut since 2019. But this session, the most serious contender was hinted at in a public hearing on the first day, introduced a few weeks later, and by February 19th, it had cleared the House and the Senate. This is the bill that would give families a $5,000 tax credit for educational expenses, including private school tuition. House Bill 93 waits patiently in the Governor Brad Little's inbox, waiting for him to do something with it. And he has 3 more days to do something with it if he so chooses. He can sign it, he can veto it, or he can let it become law without a signature. So just what will he do with it is something members of the media tried to glean this morning while having breakfast with the governor. You might remember the same day Representative Wendy Horman held that public introduction to what would be House Bill 93, Governor Little said this in his State of the State address.
Any school choice measure I would consider must be done the Idaho way. That means it is fair, responsible, transparent, and accountable.
Well, today, with that bill on his desk, Governor Little was asked how many of those 4 criteria does House Bill 93 cover.
The only part of what I said that I really agreed with was the price of it. There's not enough accountability in it. But to that mind, I don't think there's enough accountability in the money we give public schools either.
Well, Governor Little readily admitted he's never seen a perfect bill in his office. Yet House Bill 93, while within his budgetary limits, is it fair? Is it responsible? It isn't transparent? And is it accountable? Those are the questions that we're asking. But obviously, there's a lot of focus lately on what was that last on the list, that accountability part. But to shrug off the fact that parental choice tax credit bill isn't accountable enough because, well, neither are Idaho public schools seems a bit odd. Between being an accredited school and background checks for certified teachers, administrators, and other staff at that school who have access to children, from protections against discrimination or for students with disabilities, to disclosures of budgets, to testing to make sure there's a return on the investment. Those are just some of the things on the short list of what is required of Idaho public schools when it comes to accountability. House Bill 93 requires none of those things, only that non-public schools would have to teach math, science, social studies, and English or language arts. And there's also a parent survey. That's it. By the way, this bill is not exactly veto-proof, having passed the House with just 60% and 57% in the Senate. 2/3 is needed to override a veto. And as we also talked about, and what was brought up this morning, the opposition to this bill has been vocal and, well, voluminous.
Thousands.
Is it more one way than the other?
Yeah, well, of course, with what happened last week, we listen, but we also verify with what happened last week.
And so, yeah, how much weight do you put into that response to your office?
I put weight into it. I mean, it's important to me to know that I don't believe that Idaho is or this country is a true democracy where you just make decisions based on the number of people that show up. But you absolutely have to take that into account.
Absolutely. So what did happen last week? Well, the governor's office tells us they got so many phone calls after that bill cleared the Senate, they had to increase the number or how many their system could handle at once. And yes, Idaho isn't a direct democracy. We know this. But Governor Little did refer to the, quote, voice of the people when talking about the Medicaid expansion repeal bill still floating around the State House. He said Idahoans overwhelmingly voted for expansion in the 2018 initiative when talking about how maybe shouldn't be messed with too much. Okay, so speaking of medical care, Governor Little was also a little wary of the whammy bill. House Bill 176 would end the 53-year-long co-op Idaho has with Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, and Montana, otherwise known as WWAMI, to participate in the University of Washington's medical school, since Idaho does not have a medical school of its own. The bill's sponsor wants to do this because, well, UW couldn't commit to offering more spots in that program for Idaho students, and because the school wouldn't agree to restrict instruction on abortion, since Idaho law forbids it. But apparently, Idaho money doesn't really pay for that anyway, according to a Washington State public financial report. Regardless, Governor Little didn't indicate which way he was leaning on that bill, only that he would like Idaho to pick itself up off the floor, off the bottom of the list for doctors per capita.
I want the state to continue to increase the number of doctors we have available. Anything that disrupts the trajectory of high quality doctors, I'm going to have an issue. I just want to know all the details.
The whammy bill, House Bill 176, has been waiting for a House floor debate for more than a week. House Bill 93, by the way, the parental choice tax credit bill, was given to the governor on Friday, which means he has until Thursday to take action on it. Finally, circling back to Governor Little's State of the State and budget address, he mentioned he wanted to give $100 million in tax relief this year to Idaho families. However, so far this session, there have been 3 tax relief bills introduced, from income tax to grocery sales tax to property tax, totaling more than $400 million. With Idaho's financial commitments and the $200 million Governor Little would like to set aside as a surplus every year for the next 4, $100 million and $400 million don't exactly meet in the middle.
I'd love the signal that every year in Idaho your tax burden is going to get less. But you've got to temper that with all those other things. So they know I'm not very happy about it. So if I would have thought we could do 450, I would have proposed 450.